my friend. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives.
Well, there's no arguing with that. One of the few statements from legendary psychic Criswell that no one could deny the accuracy of. Yet despite, or possibly because of, his outlandish claims for extraordinary future events that generally failed to come to pass, Criswell was a popular celebrity for many years, a mainstay of television and popular culture. Admittedly, at the time, no one knew if Criswell's predictions for future decades were accurate or not, but they were often so outlandish that it would seem that many of his public appearances were on shows where he was treated as a figure of fun rather than a genuine fortune teller. An entertainer, not a psychic. Today, Criswell is best known for his appearances in Ed Wood's movies as part of that director's collection of eccentrics and oddballs that made up much of his entourage. In retrospect, it's odd to think that someone who was such a pop culture icon would be turning up in such low budget and, at the time at least, obscure movies as Plan 9 from Outer Space and Night of the Ghouls or Revenge of the Dead. Not to mention the Ed Wood scripted nudie horror film Orgy of the Dead from 1965, the same year that he would appear on the New Year's Eve edition of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Celebrity was a very different thing in the 1950s, and we should also note that Vampira, another star of Plan 9, was also a television celebrity and something of a cultural sensation at the time, albeit one whose star was rapidly fading after the cancellation of her pioneering TV series. The extraordinary life of Vampira is, of course, a story for another day. But that a film with two popular TV stars and the legendary Bela Lugosi would slip by almost unnoticed is, in retrospect, very odd. Criswell was, in fact, exactly the sort of eccentric that Ed Wood was drawn to. Part of his inner circle of outsiders and eccentrics that would make his work and life so intriguing. You look at Criswell now and think, well, of course he would be in Wood's life. But at the time, he was so famous that you wonder how he ever ended up in such fringe company. However, rumours persisted at the time that Criswell was a closeted homosexual. Not exactly something that would surprise you, you might think, despite his allegedly heterosexual marriage to actress and burlesque star Halo Meadows. It will probably not surprise anyone to find that the very camp and flamboyant Criswell was indeed gay, at a time when being gay was still very illegal and a guaranteed career destroyer if you were publicly exposed. No surprise then that he would choose to keep that side of his life private, and would be drawn to Wood and his collection of fellow outsiders, many of whom lived secret lives or were in some way outcasts from polite society and the entertainment mainstream. Geron Criswell King, born in 1907, was a camp and eccentric figure who was immediately recognisable. His hair, his clothes, and his voice had become iconic. He allegedly slept in a coffin, a man in love with death from an early age. He grew up in a funeral parlour and so found caskets entirely comfortable for sleeping in, though that itself brings up more questions than we might easily answer. He broke into broadcasting by buying radio airtime to sell vitamins, and, as describing the miracles of various pills and potions could only take up so much airtime, began filling in the remainder of his slot with predictions of the future. Soon, Criswell Predicts had become the entire show, and he was on his way to a sort of celebrity. He would write articles for magazines, appear on other radio shows, and from 1951 had a syndicated newspaper column. Criswell became popular because his predictions went far beyond the ordinary. Not for him the mundane predictions of politics and war. His future was a science fiction world of both sexual liberation and repression, often happening simultaneously. Titillation and scandal seemed to sweep through Criswell's predictions, alongside the usual end-of-the-world stuff, rather predictably, being pegged as happening in 1999, and other nonsense including outbreaks of cannibalism, space rays turning metal into rubber, the first interplanetary convention taking place in Las Vegas, and so on. It is, for the most part, so outlandishly absurd that you might struggle to think that anyone, even Criswell himself, was taking any of this seriously. Most of Criswell's predictions were set far enough in the future, or vaguely timed at least, that no one was going to be able to call him out on their accuracy for decades, by which time he presumably expected them to be long forgotten. So yes, it's easy to scoff at Criswell now, but perhaps we shouldn't. For the predictions on his 1970 LP, recorded at a time when he was already, for most people, a forgotten figure, caught between his past celebrity and the rediscovery of Ed Wood's movies, are often unnervingly close to a world that we might recognise. People separated into hardened political splits of left and right that no one can switch from, unisex fashions, the rise of body art, people who are famous just for being famous. All of this is predicted in the first 3 minutes of the LP, and who could seriously say that he was wrong? Perhaps his specific details are a bit off? So far we haven't seen a lot of men advertising their political affiliations through painted genitalia, but never say never. The broader predictions are, though, oddly close to the bone. It does become a bit bizarre after this, however. Brain transplants by vending machine? Still, listen and learn. What's more, most modern futurists, those who make a nice living from making what are little more than guesses about where the world is heading politically, technologically and culturally, have a success level not that much different to Criswell's, but because they do so in a less flamboyant manner and have the questionable weight of expertise on their side, they're rarely pulled up about it. Where, you might think, are the flying cars, Martian colonies and Second Ice Age that we were all told were just around the corner in the 1970s? So, was Criswell a genuine psychic? Well, no, obviously. Whether he believed himself to have the gift is another matter. Many of those who knew him said that he genuinely considered himself to have psychic powers, at least at first. He once stated to a friend that the powers declined once he started making money from them. Divine punishment for exploiting a gift to humanity, perhaps. It's entirely possible that Criswell really did believe himself to have the gift, but still felt the need to exaggerate and spice up his predictions for a sensation-hungry public. No one wants to hear about a future that is only marginally different to the present. But we'll never really know. There was neither a deathbed confession of fakery or a defiant claim of authenticity recorded. One of those who certainly believed in Criswell was the legendary actor Mae West, who employed him as her personal psychic for some time. Well, why not when his predictions included the pair of them alongside Liberace flying to the moon and West becoming President of the United States? These are, as you may be aware, some of his less accurate predictions. Still, so impressed by him was she that in 1955 she recorded the song Criswell Predicts, which is, entirely predictably, rather magnificent. Criswell wrote several books of predictions, which are somewhat hit and miss with their accuracy no matter how much you want to interpret them. For instance, London has yet to be destroyed by a meteor, but his fame rapidly diminished in the 1970s. Just as Ed Wood's films vanished into obscurity until they were later rediscovered by cult movie fans, so Criswell seemed to be a hangover from the past, soon replaced by a new generation of celebrity psychics and the likes of Uri Geller. It's ironic that even as public fascination with the paranormal and the occult exploded in the 1970s, one of the first people to reach fame in the field had slipped out of the public consciousness. Who saw that coming?
I regret to predict the return of national prohibition in 1982. Whee! I predict a very successful political career for Miss Christine Jorgensen. Remember this prediction. It's strange. I predict the end of the world will take place on August the 18th, 1999. You be there. Remember this prediction.
The growing cult around Plan 9 from Outer Space might have seen Criswell having a late career revival, but in truth, few of those involved in the film seem to really benefit from its dubious status as the worst film ever made, which I'm sure I don't need to tell you is a ludicrous claim that only the laziest critics and most culturally vacuous people still cling to. In the pre-internet days, pop culture revivals could often still be relatively niche affairs, and those who were connected to the films often remained in obscurity, with people unable or unwilling to actually find them. Criswell was apparently unaware of the Ed Wood films finding a new audience, first through the mockery of the Medved brothers and other idiots with far less talent than Wood ever had, and then from a more sincere appreciation by fans of eccentric outsider cinema. No one contacted Criswell to make new predictions, and he died in 1982, pretty much unnoticed at the time. A posthumous record, one that he'd recorded and specifically asked not to be released until after his death, was issued by his friend and fellow Ed Wood actor Paul Marco in 1995, with Marco performing the A-side Home on the Strange under his Kelton the Cop alias.
Someone walked over my grave, disturbing my sleep. A sleep that I thought would last through eternity. Someone walked over my grave, awakening me and bringing me back to reality.
Sadly, pretty much all of his work is now out of print or no longer in circulation. Nevertheless, Criswell has, arguably, a higher profile now than at any time since he was at the height of his fame. The Criswell Predicts LP is at least easy to find online. Most of his movies are now available in collector editions, and there's a biography in print. While he's a supporting character in Tim Burton's Ed Wood movie, I can't help but think that there's an entire film in the Criswell story just waiting to be made. As always, I'm interested to know what you think of this story. What are your favourite Criswell predictions, either outlandishly silly or uncannily accurate? Let us know in the comments. I'm sure that if he was around today, Criswell will be predicting that you like this video and subscribe to The Overlooked Hotel. Hopefully those predictions will be more accurate than many of his claims. If you'd like videos on some of the other Ed Wood entourage like Vampira and Tor Johnson, or even Ed Wood himself, let me know. I think that even now the stories that we have on these eccentric characters are not the complete picture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.
Monsters to be pitied, monsters to be despised. A night with the ghouls.